All right, check, check, check. It's showing me that I'm broadcasting audio. What do we got? We got audio now, Carrie and Mike. If you're still not getting it, I'm going to come out and come back in a minute. But tell me if you got it. All right, good. So let me start over again. The reason that I'm doing this broadcast today, the thing in particular that's precipitated me getting off my tractor and coming in here to do this, is that something that's shown up on everybody's news feed in the world is this issue that's come up right now where the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, known as SUA in the industry, is threatening to sue the BLM to close over 300,000 acres of riding terrain in and around Moab. I dealt with SUA a lot when I was the executive director of ShareTrails.org. We successfully stopped them several times. Back when that organization really had some legal teeth, they didn't like it when we got involved in something. So, good news, bad news. Let's start with the bad news first. 100 years from now, there's not going to be recreational motorcycling like there is right now. There's just not. But 100 years from now is a long time off. And in our immediate timeline, most of us are concerned about the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. There's plenty that we can do to push back on stuff like this, but you have to be smart about the way that you go about pushing back. And what I've determined and observed over and over in my time working professionally as an advocate for motorized use of public lands, which is an allowed use. Look, you have every right in the world to be on motorized trails and public lands. Now, you don't have a right to be where you're not supposed to be, and there's some arguments about, where we should and shouldn't be. But a lot of public land is open for our use. You have every right to be there, and the environmentalists don't believe that. They are slowly chipping away and trying to erode our right to be where we want to be and where we have every right to be. Now, there's several problems that are rolled up in this problem, and this I used to see things like this all the time. Once every couple of months, there was something like this that came up, and all of a sudden it's red alert. We got to scramble everybody. We got to hit the decks and beat on these people. The reason that I don't get like that is because this stuff goes on all the time everywhere. It's like people getting all bent out of shape at the police shooting some young person somewhere in the country, when in Chicago there's a murder basically every single day. We have actions like this going on all the time, and generally we lose. And the reason that we lose is because the environmental groups are extremely well funded, they're well organized, and they do a better job at advocating for what they want than we do for advocating what we want. Not for lack of effort, I would add. There are some individuals that I worked with in advocating for motorized access that were fantastic. They were professional people. They were intelligent, well-educated. They did, and they understood that they had to figure out how the system worked to get what they want. It's not enough to walk in, carrying signs and saying we're going to burn the whole place down. That never works. Or if it does work, riding trails is going to be the least of your concerns. Where you're going to get your next loaf of bread is going to be something else. What happened to all the currency? So you have to learn how to work the system, and that requires some patience, and it requires some intelligence, it requires the ability to read, and it requires the ability to understand that the way our system is set up, you're not going to get everything that you want. Now, I know that's a bitter pill for some of you to swallow because it seems like the environmentalists always get everything they want, but I would argue that's not completely true. I think they win more often than we do, but they don't always win, and I was part of some of those defeats. But here's what you have to do. One, you got to recognize that the agencies, the BLM and the Forest Service, are rarely the problem. Now, every once in a while, you get somebody in an agency somewhere that is, I don't know a better way to put it, they're an asshat. Or they're a rabid environmentalist, and they do create some problems. Most of those people are back in D.C., though. They're in a headquarters somewhere. That was one of the things that Trump wanted to do, move the headquarters of those agencies out into areas where they're closer to the people who are affected by the decisions they make, something that I approved of, by the way. But I've dealt with agencies for years, and I like most of the people I deal with in agencies. They're sympathetic to our plight. I talk to people in agencies all the time, including today, who say, I can't really tell anybody that I talk to you, but, right on, do what you're doing. I like to ride motorcycles and sleds and stuff too. Look, the people that work in those agencies took those jobs because they like the outdoors. They like to recreate and stuff. So they're very likely sympathetic to your cause, unless you're one of these, Clive and Bundy kind of people. I do what I want. If you're a cartman of the outdoors, they're not sympathetic to you. But if you're any reasonable person recreating responsibly in public lands, you actually have a lot of friends in the agencies. Your enemies are twofold. First of all, they're environmental groups. Environmental groups don't like you, and they're not going to stop until nobody rides a motorcycle in the woods. That's their goal. So how do you stop them? Well, you got to figure out a way to take their money away, because they make money hand over fist. When I was executive director of Shared Trails, we were pretty successful at raising money. We weren't as successful as we needed to be, which is why I'm not there anymore. And the reasons for that are complex. But we raised a lot of money. And I raised money principally from people that had 2 clapped-out dirt bikes in the back of a 10-year-old pickup truck somewhere. Those were the people that would dig deep into their wallets and give us money. The problem is, the people that should have been helping us out, a lot of the OEMs did not. The environmental groups don't have that problem. They have big corporations everywhere lined up to give them money. I am well known for the fact that in the tour of Idaho, the only sponsors I'll work with are the people that helped me out when I was with Shared Trails. There were some people that ran businesses that didn't have a lot of money, and sometimes I think that it really hurt them to give us the donations that they gave. But there were people that gave us thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. In some cases, I'm pretty sure that they didn't have to help fight for your right to access. And none of those companies ever said to me, you got to spend this in my backyard, which is another problem. Look, I don't ride Moab. Moab's too crowded, and I like to ride in places where there aren't people. I used to ride mountain bikes there, but I just don't recreate in Moab. It's changed too much since the 70s when I used to hang out there quite a bit. And plus, riding right out my back gate is so good, I rarely feel compelled to travel beyond Idaho anyway. So it would be really easy for me to say, I don't care about that. That's not in my backyard. And that's precisely what a lot of people who recreate in public lands do. If it's not an issue that affects them directly, they're not really that interested in it. Now, this Moab thing does affect a lot of people directly, because a lot of people like to go down there to recreate. People from all over the country go to Moab. So I think they'll probably get a pretty big response. The BLM planning documents, there'll probably be a big public response, a pro-motorized public response to that. But in general, when I looked at legal fights, I used to spend a minimum of $5,000 a month in legal bills. That was the minimum. That was the baseline, the bottom. Some months it would be $20K, fighting cases all over the country. I didn't tell our attorneys which cases to choose and which cases not to choose, with one exception. There was one time when I said we cannot in good conscience spend members' monies to work on this issue that is so localized that it doesn't have a benefit that we can leverage anywhere else. And the attorneys actually agreed with me on that. They were being pressured by a member of the board of directors to do this. So what we did, our legal strategy is, we don't care where the fight is as long as we think we can prevail. You don't want to lose. If you lose, you set bad precedents. So you look around for places where you're more likely to prevail. That's where you spend your money, because that sets a precedent that then has to apply everywhere. So there are certain circuits that have more judges that are sympathetic to our plight. The smart thing is to fight there initially. Now, this thing that Sue is doing right now, there's no choice. You're going to have to fight them on their home ground. But in general, you have to be smart to figure out where to best articulate your fight, because you have limited resources. The environmentalists will outspend you somewhere between 10 to 1 to 100 to 1. So you got to leverage your money. You have to be smart about the way you do it. And that's not always spending money in your backyard. You might have to, it might be that the best place to fight this legal fight is in Louisiana or something, because you're likely to get a favorable decision there. That's a hard sell for a lot of people. They're not interested in spending the money unless it's an issue that they care something about. So I'm going to weigh in on this Moab issue, and I'll help fund it, even though I don't ride there, because I understand that a victory there helps everybody, even though it's not likely to benefit me personally directly or in a direct sense. Down the road, it will. That's the way you have to think. So not only are the environmental groups the people that you have to worry about, the other people that you have to worry about are your fellow recreationalists, your fellow motorized recreationalists. Look, it is people that are involved in motorcycle recreation, or I should say motorcycle recreation, motorized recreation, are well known for not playing nice with others. That's just the long, tall, and short of it. I'll tell you flat out, I don't care who's pissed off at me for saying this. Motorcyclists were the easiest group to work with, far and away. Are there some nutcases in our sport? There sure are. But there were less than a lot of the other modalities that I dealt with. The Jeep people were just as good. So the people in Jeeps and the people on motorcycles, they dug deep into their pockets. They understood this. Maybe this in my backyard is not the best place to spend this money. They understood everything that I've just told you. They understood the fact that, in general, we were suing to protect a decision that the agencies had already made that was favorable to us. The environmentalists come along, go, nope, and they sue. That's why they get the EJA money all the time. I think I already mentioned this, but EJA is the Equal Access to Justice Act. And it was signed by our buddy Jimmy Carter back in 1980 to, quote unquote, give the little guy a chance when they go up against the government. The environmental groups have turned this into a cottage industry. They sue, and then they, again, apply for relief. They get all their legal fees reimbursed. And one time I had to be an expert witness because an environmental group was trying to charge about 10 times what our attorneys charged. They were trying to get returned to them by the government. It's an absolute scam. And if Trump had actually been any good at governing or shown any real interest in governing, that's something that should have gone out the window. I think we could have made that go away. So what happens is these environmental groups sue. When they win, they get EJA money. They get to recover some of that stuff. My group never got to. Well, one time we got to recover some money. Because we actually did sue an agency over a decision, and we got some money back, which we didn't get to keep. I mean, it went to the member groups that donated money for the cause. So the environmental groups are a problem, but again, our fellow motorized recreationalists are a problem. Because outside of Jeepers and outside of motorcyclists, you got people that basically are like, it's like herding cats. They're not going to give money unless it benefits them directly tomorrow. Or they don't care about anything. The ATV, UTV group, those are the worst. Those people have no organization. There's nobody in charge. There's nobody that's out there trying to set good examples. I think even though it's entirely possible for you to operate a UTV in a responsible manner, I see very few people doing it. Those things have torn up. Deserts all over the Southwest are ruined because of overuse by UTVs. And my question is, okay, so these UTVs are making a couple of OEMs that I know about richer than Croesus. Where are you all in spending money for stuff like this? You're making money hand over fist selling these things to people, and you are spending exactly $0 to help ameliorate the damage and bad feelings that your product is creating. UTVs created more of a headache for me than anything else. And when I was with Share Trails, I was supposed to be advocating for everybody, but I got to tell you, it was really hard for me to advocate for people on UTVs because I think most of them are irresponsible. And I think they're causing a lot of trouble for the rest of the responsible motorized recreation community. And by and large, most of the modalities are responsible. The motorcyclists and the Jeepers are the best, but the snow machiners were pretty good to work with, by and large. And there were a few other mountain bikers. We started working with them a little later on, and they were pretty good to work with as well. So we've got problems in our own camp. We have a large number of people who engage in motorized recreation that are completely irresponsible about the way they go about doing it. They don't give a shit about the impression that they create on other trail users when they're out in the woods. They just don't. You got to stand up to that. You want to put a stop to some of this. The one way to do it is redress through the courts. The other way to do it is to start standing up to people in our own communities that create a bad name for all of us. You know, the doofus that shows up in the chipped diesel truck rolling coal, doing donuts in the parking lot with a couple dirt bikes strapped to the back, that guy's not doing any of us any favors either. Again, I don't see very many of those people because I think most motorcyclists are pretty good. But they're out there, and you got to say something about that. When you see that, you got to walk up to that person and tell them, "Hey, dude, you know what? You're not doing us any favor with the other 100 people that are watching this in the parking lot. It's just no good." So, how do you effectively fight not just this SUA thing, but again, this is a small part of a more overarching issue. SUA is a pretty successful group. The Wilderness Alliance is a successful group. The Winter Wildlands Alliance is a pretty successful group. We fought with all those people. There's these people that are trying to start this entire Rocky Mountain ecosystem. Those people are all, they're so happy now that Joe Biden's the president, they can barely contain themselves. Again, during the Trump administration, those were better years for us than the years that preceded that, and certainly what's going to come after. And I approve of most of what Trump did when it comes to federal land. I really do. But the problem is he did it all by executive action instead of actually by governance. Had he sat down with the Republican Party and shown sufficient interest in actually governing, there wouldn't be talk of making Grand Staircase Escalante and Bears Ears bigger once again right now. He did it by executive order, which could be undone by the next president. There was plenty of appetite in Washington to fix some of those problems for good. It just never got done because Donald Trump, even though I agree with some of the things that he was for, he just didn't show really very much of an interest in actual governance. He just kind of wanted to sign a piece of paper and wave his hand and make things happen, and that's just not the way you get things done permanently. So here's what you can do if you want to be really effective as a motorized trail advocate. One, you should get to know the people at your local agencies. Again, overwhelmingly, those are good people who are on your side. They are not the problem. Be polite to them. Even when you disagree with them, be polite to them. Don't show up to these meetings packing heat. I was at a meeting in Chalice a couple years ago, and people are walking in with guns and stuff and making vague threats. That doesn't do anybody any favors. It's silly, it's stupid, it's selfish behavior. What you're trying to do there is compensate for the fact that you have a small unit between your legs when you do idiot shit like that. So don't do that. Show up and be nice to people. Be nice even to the environmentalists. There were some of those people that I liked. I disagreed with them, but I liked them. I go to these meetings, and I don't want to be the raging guy over in a corner that everybody thinks is an ass. You don't want to be that person. So be cool when you go to these public meetings. Be polite, be respectful. Doesn't mean you can't be firm and you can't forcefully argue your point, but don't do it like a douche canoe, okay? Be reasonable when you go into these meetings. Act like you are an educated, well-read person, and you're going to get farther than you do if you act like you're a raging lunatic. The second thing that you want to do after you understand that the people at the agencies are not your enemy is you have to understand this thing about where to fight your fight, how to leverage resources, because we don't have sufficient resources on our side. So you have to understand that maybe your backyard is not the best place for this fight. When something comes up like this SUA issue right now in Moab, you got to get behind that. Go ahead and go ahead and weigh in the public comments. There's some group, Ride with Respect, the Trail Preservation Alliance. Some of these groups are really good that are going to be raising money to fight this. Support them. Give them some money. Even if it doesn't benefit you directly tomorrow, it will benefit you directly at some point. You may be separated from it by a few degrees right now, but at some point you won't be. So it behooves you to get involved in things like this. And also, be a good citizen when you're out riding. If you're supposed to have a trail tag, buy a trail tag. If you're supposed to have an off-road plate, get the off-road plate. Make sure you got a silencer, a spark arrestor in your motorcycle. Don't spin your tire any more than you have to. Be nice to other people that you meet on the trail. Don't be like the UTV people who are trying to run down everybody. because they got some twin turbocharged 150 horsepower UTV and they want to spank everybody going down this dry wash. Be cool when you run into people in the woods. When I come up on people and horses, that's your biggest problem because those horses freak out pretty easily. A horse is the only animal I know that'll have a heart attack sometimes when it sees light reflecting off a trail sign. I get my bike off the side of the trail, I take my helmet off, and I talk to the people, and those people love it. When you do that, you create nothing but a good impression. This politics is not going to do you any good when it comes to this. One of our state senators I've had dinner with before. He's not a friend, but he certainly knows who I am, and I've had dinner with him. He's given me several hours of his life to sit down and talk about issues, which is a lot for a U.S. senator. One of our representatives has been similarly generous with his time with me. And Congress is so dysfunctional, they can't get anything done. What's Congress done in the past few years? Basically nothing. So even under the Trump administration, where the stars were aligned in a manner so favorable that we're not likely to ever see them again in our lifetime, how much actual legislation, I'm not talking about executive orders now, I'm talking about legislation. How much legislation got passed? I'm looking at the feed here now of you all waiting in the comments, and I'm not seeing anybody say anything, and that's because there wasn't anything. Nothing that was substantial anyway. So, political connections, lobbyists, stuff like that, none of that stuff is going to help you out. The way you win these battles is with hearts and minds and in the court of law. In the court of law, things are stacked in your favor. Believe it or not, the laws of this country are behind us. As long as you're in places you're supposed to be and you stay out of places you're not supposed to be, the law is on your side. The reason that SUA is suing right now is because you are allowed to ride where they don't want you to ride. The law is currently on your side. So as long as you can defend yourself in court, and as long as you can defend yourself in the court of public opinion, you can win these cases. But you got to be able to raise some money to do it. So hearts and minds and lawyers, that's where you need to be concentrating your efforts. If you're a good writer or something, write a column for your local newspaper column. Be nice to other people that you meet in the trail. Don't be a nozzle. Those are the ways that you win hearts and minds. And then hire talented attorneys, and there's a bunch of them out there, to win in a court of law. But this whole stuff about, going to see D.C. and hiring lobbyists and stuff like that, that doesn't work. I've seen people spend lots and lots and lots of money on lobbyists, but the way that Congress is currently configured, that's not going to do anything. I did spend quite a bit of time when I was with Share Trails in D.C. And I always paid for those trips myself because I paid for almost all my travel when I was executive director of Share Trails. I bought ads in the magazine. I did everything I could to make sure that every dime that I could went to paying attorneys to preserve our right to ride trails. They paid me a salary, but about half of that salary went straight back into the organization. But I would go to D.C. on these trips, and, D.C. is a different place. I was not really impressed by what I saw there. The buildings are beautiful, and, I like walking up and down the mall. You can feel the history of the place. But I suppose I can talk about my frustration in dealing with D.C. by one little story. So I go to a meeting in Interior once, and I made a presentation. And there's some pretty heavyweights in this room. There are a lot of lobbyists. There are all these, high-ranking officials in the BLM and the Forest Service. The assistant undersecretaries there. And we, at the end of this presentation, there were all kinds of people walking up to shake my hand and ask questions and stuff. And they go, wow, you sound like the real deal. You sound like you actually use these trails, like you've actually been out in the woods before. And I'm going, well, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm a trail user. And they go, man, we'd really love to be able to do this, but we hardly ever get outside the city. So they'd started describing to me, these are high-ranking officials in some of these agencies. These are lobbyists that a lot of power sports organizations spend a lot of money to pay to advocate for our cause, And these people are clueless. They have no visceral connection with the outdoor experience. They just don't. The concept of riding a motorcycle down a gnarly single-track trail 100 miles from anywhere is so foreign to them that you might as well be talking about landing on Titan or something. So you're not going to get very much relief dealing with people like that because they don't get us. They don't live the life that we live. They're not really attached to the land. Then the last thing you got to do is you got to start looking at some of these OEMs and saying, hey, what about you? On the environmentalist side of this, there are all kinds of companies that line up to be the environmentalist favorite. Patagonia, Cliff Bar, all these people, they throw money hand over fist at these environmental groups and say, yeah, we want to be part of what you're doing here. Well, you know what? We got all kinds of people that sell us stuff, and a lot of them spend absolutely zero trying to help us keep trails open. They'll spend money for a nice motorized comic book for children or something like that, but they won't spend money in the court. And they'll also spend money in lobbyists, but that's generally to further their own interest, to prevent regulations that they find inconvenient. But I can count basically on one hand the number of those groups that actually spent money where it's effective, which is in a court of law, a legal fight. So while you're thinking about this particular SUA thing, why don't you think about starting to build a little bit of a fire under some of these OEMs? Honda, Polaris, people like that. Polaris is causing us all big problems because those razors are big headaches for every other trail user. Maybe Polaris ought to be ponying up a little bit more money for trail advocacy, for trail repair, things like that. Some of their sub-companies are wonderful at that. Climb helped me out incredibly. Trail Tech helped me out incredibly. But Polaris, Honda, Kawasaki, anybody that makes off-road vehicles should be putting money into helping us maintain trails. It's very short-sighted of them not to do so. The reason that they don't is because they're a little bit afraid of associating with our side because they think we're all a bunch of rock-throwing Clive and Bundys. And they got to be able to sell, Honda's got to be able to sell scooters with flowers all over them to 16-year-old girls. And they're afraid if they get involved with people like us, it's going to bite them in the bum. And it's a reasonable fear. I mean, I completely understand that. But at some point, they have to understand that if this stuff continues to get closed at the rate it's getting closed, it's going to be hard to sell somebody a $30,000 machine if there's no place for them to take it. So it can't just be me telling those guys that, which I told them for years. It's got to be all of you. It's got to be consumers that are going in saying, wait a minute, before I spend X number of dollars in this machine from you, I want to know what you're doing for our community. Are you doing anything? And get an answer. Don't just sit there and let the salesperson, put some icing on a crap cake. Find out what they are doing substantively. Build some heat under those people. Then when issues like this come up, we got a war chest where we can fight stuff like this. There's very few national groups that are very good at defending us anymore. There used to be several really good national groups, but the problem is getting the money was hard to come by. The years I was with Share Trails, I was there 3 years as executive director. I aged a decade. My health went downhill. I never slept a single night. It was hard. And I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I'm just telling you that I understand what happens to these groups because every single day is a grind trying to scare up money. That's what you do all the time. You're concerned every single day is how am I going to pay these legal bills this month? How am I going to pay for this staff this month? We were a very lean organization, and it was still a challenge every single day to pay the bills. And at some point, I was calling people saying, dude, can you write me a check? People I knew that had some money. That's what you have to do. We shouldn't have to do that. These OEMs should be out there helping to support organizations that defend your right to use their machinery on public lands. So anyway, that's the long, tall, and short of all this. Just to summarize, a lot of you think the agencies are your enemy. They are not. The agencies overwhelmingly are your friend, and you should get to know those people and understand that firsthand. Doesn't mean that everybody you're going to meet in every agency is your friend, but overwhelmingly, I know hundreds of people in various agencies around the country, BLM, Forest Service offices, And I know maybe 5 or 6 that I think are knuckleheads. The rest of those, even the people that I disagree with, they'll listen to you and they'll look at the law. And even if it goes against their personal values, they're going to stand up for you if you're right. That's professionalism. It's remarkable. All those agencies are full of people like that. They're not the problem. The problem are environmental groups. Environmental groups get tons of money because of the Equal Access to Justice Act. They're typically suing the agencies. I spent money to defend agencies, so we never got any of that EJA money. They got the EJA money when they won. And then finally, the people that you got to look at are sometimes in the mirror or sometimes standing right next to you. They are your fellow motorized advocates who, A, don't understand that not every effective fight is in your backyard. B, you got to spend some money if you want to maintain trails. C, you got to learn how to play nice with other people. And D, you need to be building a fire under the people that have all of the money, who are the OEMs, the people that sell you this equipment. There are some people that are fantastic, but they're not the top-tier companies. It's the second-tier companies that are generally pretty good about stuff like that. And in some cases, it was people in those companies pulling out their own wallets to pony up. That's why I don't care who in the world sells equipment. I'm buying all my equipment from Climb, Trail Tech, Rocky Mountain ATV MC, and these other companies that help me out. Fly Racing. There's a whole list on my own websites about the people that helped me out when I was with Share Trails. And you could make boots that were lighter than air, and I'd still wear Climb boots or wear boots, clothing, buy equipment from people that helped me out. Not a big one for cancel culture or boycotts, but where you spend your money is important too. And I'm not going to tell you not to buy a Patagonia jacket, but I will tell you this. There are people in the power sports industry that make everything that you could ever want, who also spend quite a bit of money trying to defend your ability to access public lands. Well, anyway, ran over. I really need to get back to work today, and I didn't intend to do this long. Again, I'll post some links a little bit later. Dirt Bike Channel did a really, really, really good presentation on this, and I'll send you to those guys. And some others have as well. But the thing that's showing up on everybody's feed has got the links in it to make comments. Again, make your comments respectful. It doesn't do any good to talk about how, I've been riding in Moab for the last 40 years. That's a comment that you might as well not even put down, because nobody cares, at least not anybody that matters. You need to speak directly to the issues that are behind the lawsuit, the environmental impacts, talking about positive economic benefits and stuff. That's entirely appropriate because you're weighing different concerns there. But keep the emotion out of it. Address the issues directly. There's all kinds of people out there on the web that are giving you very, very good suggestions about how to structure your comments. But be succinct. Don't put down 10,000 words or something like that, because it takes too long to read. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. Put down a few hundred words, hit the high points, and then get all your friends to do the same thing. Numbers matter when it comes to stuff like this, and the numbers matter at least as much, if not more, than the contents of any particular comment, unless the comments are like flaming, yeah, you can close this all you want to, but we're going to come with our guns and keep it open ourselves. That doesn't do anybody any good at all, and I see way too much of that silly kind of stuff. So anyway, that's it. I think this may be a little bit of a topic that we'll start pursuing a little bit on PBR Monday. I know that most of that's devoted to the tour of Idaho, but it's not exclusively, and maybe we'll start talking a little bit more of this, a little bit more about access issues every once in a while. To be truthful, I've been on vacation from access issues since I left Share Trails. Like I said, that 3 years aged me a decade, and it's been pretty good for me just to stay out of it for a while. But the SUA issue is a perfect example of something that should not be happening. We're in the right on this. And if we play it smart, even with the current political administration, I think we can get what we want. But playing it smart is really important. And your part of it's to go out there, weigh in those comments, and do it in a good, productive manner. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Be seeing you.